My parents revealed I wasn't their biological son at my brother's engagement party. I sat quietly, packed my things, and disappeared. What happened next destroyed the perfect family image they cherished for decades. I'm Alex. I'm 30 years old, and my parents announced I wasn't their real son at my own brother's engagement party. Before I tell you how that single, drunkenly slurred sentence led to the complete and utter implosion of their perfect, meticulously curated world, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always incredible to see how far these stories can travel. The party was exactly what you'd expect from my parents, Henry and Janet. It was held at the Oak Valley Country Club, a place so exclusive you could practically smell the trust funds and old money in the air. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with the aroma of freshly cut grass from the golf course just outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Waiters in crisp white jackets drifted through the crowd with trays of champagne and elaborate canapes. It was a perfect picture of the perfect family celebrating a perfect milestone. The problem with perfect pictures, though, is that they're almost always fake. The smiles are held a little too long, the poses a little too stiff. My brother, Mark, the man of the hour, was in his element. He stood beside his fiancée, Olivia, a radiant but visibly nervous young woman, and he soaked in the adoration like a plant absorbing sunlight. He'd always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose path was paved with my parents' money and approval. I was the other one, the responsible one, the structural engineer who made sure the bridge wouldn't collapse. I worked hard, got the scholarships that my parents told me they couldn't afford, built a career from the ground up, and made sure the family name had some actual substance behind its glossy shine. My father, Henry, a man who wore his ambition like a well-tailored suit, tapped a spoon against his champagne flute. The light caught his Rolex as he raised his glass. A wide, proud smile stretched across his face. "If I could have your attention," he began, his voice booming with practiced confidence, "I'd like to make a toast to my son, Mark, and his beautiful bride-to-be, Olivia. Mark, you've always been our pride and joy. You carry the family legacy forward." My mother, Janet, impeccably dressed and smiling brightly, leaned into the microphone beside him. "Oh, absolutely," she added, her voice a little too loud, a little too sharp. "Mark is the one who's truly our pride. He is our real legacy, after all." A few people chuckled, mistaking her words for a mother's simple, effusive praise. But I saw the way my father's smile tightened at the edges. I heard the slight slur, the telltale sign she'd had one too many glasses of that expensive champagne. Later, as she held court with a circle of her gossiping friends, the final, brutal nail was hammered into the coffin of my 30-year-long illusion. One of the women was gushing about how wonderful it was that they had two such successful, handsome sons. Janet laughed, a shrill, ugly sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, please," she slurred, waving a dismissive hand adorned with a large diamond ring. "Alex is capable, I'll give him that. He's useful. But he's not, well, he's not really ours." The words, though whispered, seemed to detonate in the center of the room. The background chatter, the soft jazz music, the clinking of glasses. It all faded into a dull, distant roar. My world narrowed to that single, brutal sentence. He's not really ours. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't yell or throw a drink. That would have been their drama, their stage. Instead, I just stood there, my glass of club soda feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. I looked at my mother's smiling, oblivious face. I looked at my father, who was now studiously avoiding my gaze, suddenly fascinated by a spot on the ceiling. I looked at Mark, who was laughing at some joke, completely unaware that his entire gilded world was built on a lie he was the primary beneficiary of. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. A flash froze. It turned into a block of ice in my chest, cold and hard and clear. I placed my untouched glass on a passing waiter's tray, turned my back on the whole charade, and walked out of that country club without a single word. I got into my car, the engine a low growl in the silent, manicured parking lot. I didn't drive back to my apartment. I didn't drive anywhere near the life I had known. I just drove. And as the glittering city lights blurred into streaks in my rearview mirror, I felt the suffocating weight of my entire life finally, blessedly, begin to lift. I was leaving and I was never, ever looking back. The highway at night is a lonely, hypnotic place. The rhythmic thud-thud of the tires on the pavement, the endless stream of white and red lights. It was the perfect soundtrack for a life unraveling. I ended up at a place called Lakeside Pines Resort, a quiet, slightly dated motel 2 hours north of the city. The kind of place people go when they don't want to be found. The room was clean, generic, and blessedly anonymous. It smelled faintly of pine cleaner and regret. It was perfect. For the first time in my life, my phone was off. There were no expectations breathing down my neck. No family dinners to passively endure. No urgent calls from my mother asking me to fix her laptop. No last-minute emergencies from my father's company that required my expert eye on a Saturday night. The silence in the room was a physical presence, and in it, the ghosts of my past rose up to greet me, no longer whispers but full-throated screams. The memory of the science fair was the first to arrive. I was 10 years old, standing on a makeshift stage in the hot, stuffy school gymnasium. A big, floppy blue ribbon for first place in the citywide science fair was pinned to my chest. My project, a fully functional miniature maglev train built from scratch, sat on the table beside me, its little magnets humming. I had worked on it for months in the garage, soldering wires until my fingers were sore, reading college-level physics books at the library. I scanned the audience of parents, a hopeful, toothy grin plastered on my face, looking for my own. I finally spotted them near the back. My mother, Janet, was tapping her watch, her expression bored. My father, Henry, was whispering something in her ear. They gave me a quick, distracted wave. More of a flick of the wrist, really, and then they slipped out the side door. I stood there on the stage, my smile faltering, as the principal called my name. I later found out they'd left early to make it to Mark's soccer game. He was a bench warmer. He played for less than 5 minutes. But his team had won. That was the picture that made it to the family Christmas card that year. The whole family, beaming with Mark held high on my dad's shoulders. My blue ribbon, and the pride that came with it, was left to gather dust in a drawer. The memory faded, only to be replaced by another, sharper one. I was 18, working double shifts at a greasy diner called the Corner Grill all summer. My world smelled of fried onions, hot coffee, and bleach. I was saving every penny for college, for textbooks, for a decent laptop, for the deposit on a dorm room. My parents had sat me down for a serious talk when I got my acceptance letters. "Alex, we're proud of you," Henry had said, in his best serious dad voice. "But you're a resourceful young man. We feel it's important for your character that you take financial responsibility for your own higher education." It was a loan, they explained, for my character. That same summer, Mark, who had barely scraped through high school with a C average, was sent on an all-expenses-paid backpacking trip through Europe to find himself. The family group chat, a thing I usually kept on mute, was a constant stream of pictures. Mark grinning in front of the Eiffel Tower. Mark eating gelato by the Trevi Fountain. Mark giving a thumbs up from a beach in Greece. I remember one night, after a brutal 10-hour shift, my feet aching and my clothes smelling of grease, I looked at a picture of him on his phone, tanned and carefree. Under it, my mother had commented, "So proud of our adventurous boy. Live your best life." I looked at my own grease-stained hands, the calluses forming on my palms, and felt that familiar, hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't just unfair. It was a different set of rules for a different class of son. But the ghosts weren't just personal. The biggest one, the one that truly mattered now, was professional. It was a ghost named Project Nightingale. During my sophomore year of college, majoring in systems engineering and business strategy, I became obsessed with predictive analytics. I poured hundreds of hours into creating a proprietary data analysis model. It was my baby, fueled by cheap instant coffee and a burning passion to create something truly innovative. I built it from the ground up. It could analyze market data and predict consumer behavior with an accuracy that, at the time, was unheard of. I showed it to my father not as a business proposal, but as a son showing his dad what he was capable of. I was so proud, so desperate for a flicker of genuine pride from him. He saw something, all right, but it wasn't his son's brilliance. It was a dollar sign. "This is incredible, Alex," he'd said, his eyes gleaming with an intensity one mistook for paternal pride. "Truly remarkable. Let me show this to some of the senior guys at the company. We could build on this, make it a real-world application." I was 20 years old and starving for his approval. I gave him everything: the code, the research papers, the algorithms. I signed a piece of paper he told me was a simple non-disclosure agreement to protect my idea. A few months later, H&S Consulting, my father's firm, launched a new flagship service called the Grayson Predictive Index. It was built entirely on my model. My father filed the patents under his name. It became the bedrock of his company's success, the thing that elevated him from a mid-tier consultant to a major industry player. I was never mentioned. I was never compensated. When I asked about it once, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "It's all for the family, son. A rising tide lifts all boats." But I was chained to the anchor. Staring out at the dark, placid lake, the anger I should have felt all those years finally started to bubble to the surface. It was a cold, clarifying rage. This wasn't just about favoritism or feeling left out. This was a systematic, calculated exploitation of my life, my work, and my naive desire for their love. I finally turned on my phone. It lit up like a Christmas tree. Dozens of missed calls from mom and dad. A string of increasingly frantic texts. I thumbed over my mother's name and held it down. The option appeared: delete conversation. I pressed it without hesitation. I did the same for my father. Then I called the one person in the world I knew I could trust. "Eric," I said, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Alex, it's 2 a.m. Are you okay? You sound weird." His voice was thick with sleep but instantly alert. He'd been my best friend since we were college roommates. The one person who saw the dynamic in my family and never treated me with pity, just with respect. I took a shaky breath. This was the first time I was saying it out loud. "I need a lawyer, man." The sleepiness in his voice vanished completely. "Okay, I'm a lawyer, so that works out. What's going on?" "They're not my real parents, Eric," I said, the words feeling alien on my tongue. "Janet and Henry. They adopted me. They let it slip tonight at Mark's party." I then told him everything, the words pouring out of me in a torrent. The years of being treated like a second-class citizen, and most importantly, the software. "He stole it from me, Eric. Project Nightingale. It's the whole foundation of his company, and he stole it." "Jesus, Alex," he breathed. Okay, first things first. Do not, under any circumstances, talk to them. Don't answer their calls, don't reply to their texts. Where are you?" "A motel. Lakeside Pines. About 2 hours north." "Good. Stay there. Now listen to me. We need to think like lawyers, not like a hurt son. Evidence. You need to secure your evidence. Think, man. Old laptops, university cloud accounts, your old college email address. Anything with a timestamp that proves you created that code before he patented it. Can you do that?" "Yeah," I said, a new sense of purpose cutting through the fog of pain. "Yeah, I think I can." As I hung up, a new notification popped up on my screen. An email from an anonymous, encrypted address. The subject line was a single word: "Careful." My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened it. The message was short, and not from a stranger. "Alex, it's Olivia. I am so sorry. This is all my fault. At the party, I was looking at some of the old family albums Janet had out, and I just casually asked why you weren't in any of the baby pictures with Mark. I had no idea it was a secret or that it would do this. I feel horrible. Please be careful. Just now, I overheard Mark on the phone with your father. They're freaking out. Henry was talking about shredding old R&D documents from the office and erasing some files from the main company server. I don't know if this helps, but I once heard him complaining about the company's ancient IT infrastructure. He mentioned there was an old legacy backup server that nobody ever touches. He once called your model Project Nightingale in the early days when he was complaining about the R&D costs. Maybe check there? Good luck. And again, I am so sorry. My breath hitched. Olivia, my brother's fiancée, was giving me the key. She was pointing me to the one place they might forget to look. The one stone they might leave unturned. That was all the confirmation I needed. Fueled by a potent cocktail of grief, rage, and adrenaline, I spent the next 4 hours hunched over my laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating my face in the dark hotel room. With the help of a tech-savvy friend from my old university, a guy who owed me a big favor, I gained remote access to that dusty, forgotten digital corner of my father's kingdom. And there it was, a folder labeled simply Nightingale. Inside was a treasure trove, my original source code, my research notes, filled with my own handwriting and diagrams, my email exchanges with a beloved computer science professor discussing the core algorithms. And every single file was perfectly preserved, with digital timestamps proving they were created and last modified between 2011 and 2012. 2 full years before Henry's company ever filed its first patent for the Grayson Predictive Index. It was the smoking gun. No, it was more than that. It was the entire arsenal. I downloaded everything, saved it to 3 separate encrypted drives, and had my friend wipe our digital tracks. As the first hint of dawn began to break, painting the calm lake in hues of orange and pink, I leaned back in my chair, physically and emotionally exhausted, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in my entire life. The illusion was dead. The grief was a tangible thing in the room. But for the first time, I had the power. They had drawn the battle lines 30 years ago. Tonight, I was finally going to war. The morning brought the storm. The frantic, pleading texts from my mother, Janet, had morphed overnight into something sharp and venomous. My phone, which I'd left on silent, was a constant barrage of her escalating panic. Janet, 6:15 a.m. Alexander, this childish tantrum has gone on long enough. You are embarrassing this family. Call me now. Janet, 7:30 a.m. Your father's most important business partners were at that party. Do you have any idea the damage you've caused with your little disappearing act? How you made us look. Janet, 8 a.m. I am your mother. I am the woman who raised you. You will answer me. I read them with a strange, clinical detachment. It was like observing a specimen under a microscope. This woman, who had casually dismissed my entire existence with a wave of her hand, was now falling back on the title of mother as a tool of command. The irony was so thick I felt like I could choke on it. Then came the call from Mark. I almost ignored it, but a grim curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the voice of entitlement in its purest form. I answered, putting the phone on speaker so it could echo in the cheap hotel room. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he yelled, his voice cracking with a high-pitched combination of rage and panic. There was no preamble. No, hey, are you okay? No. I'm sorry you had to find out like that. Just pure, undiluted self-interest. Hello to you too, Mark, I said, my voice deliberately calm and even. It seemed to infuriate him further. Don't you hello me. You ruined my engagement party. My one night. Olivia is a mess. She's been crying all night. My parents are freaking out. All because you decided to have a little pity party for yourself. You've always been like this, Alex. Always so dramatic. Always finding a way to make everything about you. I let him rant. His words a predictable tirade of accusations. It was fascinating, really. In his version of reality, my discovery of a life-altering secret was an inconvenience, a social faux pas that had ruined his perfect evening. I was the villain for reacting to the bomb they had detonated. I had disrupted the perfect, comfortable order of his universe, a universe where he was the sun and I was just a distant, nameless planet whose only job was to stay in my lane. Are you finished? I asked coolly when he finally paused for breath. No, I'm not finished, he shrieked. You need to come home. You need to apologize. To Mom and Dad for scaring them. To Olivia for upsetting her. You need to walk back in here and fix this. I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was dry and humorless, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. Fix it? Mark, there's nothing to fix. The only thing that happened last night was that the truth finally decided to show up to the party. A truth you've been living with your entire life, I imagine. The silence on the other end was heavy and damning. He didn't deny it. Of course he didn't. So let me give you some free advice, little brother? I continued, the cold anger from the night before crystallizing into a sharp, clear purpose. Stop worrying about your party. You have much bigger problems. You should probably go and have a very serious chat with Dad. Ask him about the real foundation his multimillion-dollar company is built on. Specifically, ask him about a little thing called Project Nightingale. I think you'll find it very illuminating. I hung up before he could string together a response, my hand perfectly steady. The satisfaction was immediate and profound. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was on the offensive. I was taking control of the narrative. My next call was to the one person I knew would give me the unvarnished truth, the one person who had always looked at me with kindness, not calculation. My Uncle Thomas, my father's older brother. He was the family's academic black sheep, a tenured history professor who valued books over balance sheets. He'd always treated me like a person, not a project. He picked up on the second ring, his voice calm and weary. Alex, I was wondering when you'd call. You knew? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the question hanging in the air. I knew they adopted you, yes? He said, his voice heavy with a sadness that spoke of long-held burdens. I never, in my darkest nightmares, imagined they hadn't told you. I'm so sorry, son. I'm truly sorry. That's a cruelty I can't even begin to fathom. Why, Uncle Thomas? Why would they do it? Why adopt a child just to treat them like a second-class citizen for 30 years? He sighed, a long, ragged sound. It's a long, ugly story, Alex, and it starts and ends with your grandfather. My father. He was a brilliant man, but a hard one. A traditionalist. He built H&S Consulting from the ground up, and in his will, he set up a family trust. A very specific, very rigid one. The bulk of the company shares and, more importantly, the leadership role of CEO had to pass to a direct blood descendant. When your father and Janet struggled for years to have children, the pressure from my father was immense. It was all he talked about. Then they adopted you. It was a time of hope. But then, a year later, the miracle happened. Janet got pregnant with Mark. He paused, letting me absorb the timeline. Mark became the golden ticket, the heir apparent, the answer to all their prayers and ambitions. And you, son, you became an inconvenient truth, a reminder of their perceived failure. They couldn't undo the adoption, but they could sideline you, make you the other one. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. It wasn't just favoritism. It wasn't just emotional neglect. It was a calculated business decision. I was a placeholder who had outlived his usefulness. There's more, Uncle Thomas continued, his voice hardening with an old anger. I was part of the company back then in the early days. I was in marketing. I saw your talent up close, Alex. I saw the incredible work you were doing on that analysis program in college. And I saw Henry preparing to steal it. He called it absorbing your intellectual contribution for the good of the family business. I called it what it was, theft. Plain and simple. We had a massive fight about it in his office. I can still picture it. I told him he was sacrificing his son for his ambition. He told me I was being sentimental and naive. He said, and I'll never forget this, Alex is lucky to have a roof over his head. He owes us this. I told him I wouldn't be a party to it. I resigned the next day. I couldn't look him in the eye anymore. I couldn't be a part of his lie. My mind was reeling. My own uncle had been exiled for defending me. The betrayal wasn't a single event. It was a sprawling, multi-decade conspiracy of silence and greed. I kept copies of everything I could, my uncle said, his voice firm now. The original adoption papers, some internal memos from that time about Project Nightingale. I always hoped I'd never have a reason to show them to you. I always hoped Henry would come to his senses. But that day has come. Can you send them to me? I asked, my voice tight with a storm of emotions. Everything you have. They'll be in your inbox within the hour, he said without a moment's hesitation. Eric arrived later that day, a whirlwind of focused energy. He'd brought a change of clothes for me, a bag of bagels, and a high-speed portable scanner. We spent the rest of the afternoon in my hotel room, which had now officially become our war room. We spread the documents from Uncle Thomas across the cheap motel bedspread. There it was, my life in black and white. My adoption papers, the stark, legal text, a brutal contrast to the flowery lies of my childhood. Internal company memos from Henry dismissing my student project as a starting point for his team, and even a few handwritten letters from Janet to her sister, my Aunt Carol, complaining about the financial burden of raising another mouth to feed so soon before her real baby was born. Combined with my own digital evidence, the time-stamped files from Project Nightingale, it was an airtight, devastating case. Jesus Christ, Alex, Eric said, whistling softly as he reviewed the files for a second time. We don't just have a moral high ground here. We have a legal nuke. Intellectual property theft, corporate fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. This is a corporate kill shot. The old me, the boy who just wanted his parents' love, would have been horrified. He would have wanted to hide these papers, to pretend they didn't exist, to try and salvage some scrap of the family he thought he had. But the old Alex was gone, burned away in the fire of that public humiliation. So what's our move? I asked, my eyes meeting his over the sea of damning paper. He leaned forward, a grim, determined smile on his face. We don't go for a messy public fight. We don't send an angry, emotional email to the whole family. That's what they expect. That's a fight they think they can win by painting you as unstable. No, we do this surgically. We do this professionally. We cut the head off the snake. The decision was made. There would be no more hiding, no more quiet suffering. They had started a storm 30 years ago, but I was going to be the one to direct the lightning. The next 2 days were spent in the calm, hyper-focused center of the hurricane we were about to unleash. The panicked barrage from my family had subsided into a tense, watchful silence. They didn't know where I was, what I was thinking, or what I was planning, and that uncertainty was a weapon in itself. They were used to my predictability, my quiet compliance. My silence was something new and terrifying to them. Our budget hotel room, with its faint smell of pine cleaner, became a high-stakes command center. Eric was a master strategist, his legal mind cutting through the emotional fog of my situation to map out a precise, multi-pronged attack plan. He was in his element. Okay, Phase 1, he announced, pacing in front of the window that overlooked the placid, unjudging lake. He moved like a caged tiger, full of coiled energy. We neutralize Henry's ability to operate and control the narrative. We don't sue him for money. Not yet. That's a long, messy process. We go straight for his power source, his credibility. We take away his armor. He sat down on the edge of the other bed, his expression deadly serious. On your behalf, my firm will draft a formal cease and desist letter. Not an email. A formal, physical letter, delivered by a no-nonsense legal courier to Henry's office tomorrow morning. It will state, in cold, hard legal terms, that H&S Consulting is illegally utilizing intellectual property owned by you, Mr. Alexander Grayson. It will demand they immediately stop using your proprietary model, which, as we both know, will effectively paralyze their entire high-end consulting service. I felt a tremor of something, a mix of fear and exhilarating power. This was the first shot over the bow. He'll ignore it, I said, thinking of my father's arrogance. He'll call his lawyers, laugh it off, and call it a ridiculous bluff from his ungrateful son. Of course he will, Eric said with a shark-like grin. He'll see it as a family squabble he can crush. And that's where he makes his fatal mistake. Because this isn't about family. And while he's busy trying to swat a fly, we bring down the hammer. That's phase 2. This was the part of the plan that was pure, cold-blooded genius. Eric's strategy wasn't to leak this to the press or start a messy war on social media. It was to execute a corporate takedown so clean and professional that Henry wouldn't know what hit him until his office was already on fire. We're going to create what's called a virtual data room, Eric explained, pulling his laptop towards him and setting it up on the small desk. It's a secure, encrypted, password-protected online portal. Inside, we will upload every single piece of evidence we have. Your original timestamp files for Project Nightingale, the official adoption papers, the internal memos from your uncle, Janet's charming handwritten letters, a detailed timeline of events we will write together. Everything. It will be organized, cataloged, cross-referenced, and utterly, damningly, undeniable. As he talked, he was already working, his fingers flying across the keyboard, setting up the secure server. Then we draft a second communication. This is the kill shot. It's not an emotional email. It is a formal, professional invitation. It will be sent from my law firm's official email address to 2 very specific groups of people simultaneously. He paused, looking at me to make sure I understood the gravity of this. Group 1. The other 4 members of the H&S Consulting Board of Directors. The people whose money and reputations are tied to your father. Group 2. Mr. James Harrison. Mr. Harrison, the big fish. The CEO of Harrison Industries, a massive tech conglomerate whose partnership with my father's firm 2 years ago had been the subject of articles in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. Harrison was an old-school, no-nonsense executive who valued integrity and results above all else. He'd always been more impressed with my technical work than my father's glad-handing, something that had always secretly pleased me and visibly infuriated Henry. The invitation will be polite and clinical, Eric continued. It will state that, in the interest of full transparency and upcoming legal proceedings, we invite them to review a secure dossier pertinent to the operational, ethical, and legal integrity of H&S Consulting. We provide a link and a unique, single-use password for each recipient. We let the evidence speak for itself. We don't have to make a single accusation. The documents will do it for us. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was perfect. It wasn't the act of a wounded son lashing out in pain. It was the calculated, strategic move of a wronged professional seeking justice. We were taking the battlefield away from the messy, emotional arena of family drama and moving it into the cold, unforgiving black and white landscape of corporate governance. As Eric built the legal architecture of the attack, my job was to write the narrative, a concise, factual, 2-page summary to serve as the introduction in the data room. I laid out the facts without a shred of emotion. The creation of the model during my sophomore and junior years of college. The transfer of files to my father under the guise of getting feedback. The subsequent patent filing under his name alone. The years of uncredited and uncompensated work providing updates and fixes as a family favor. I let the dates, the document numbers, and the facts tell the story of the long, slow, methodical betrayal. The process was strangely, powerfully cathartic. With every document I uploaded, with every cold, hard fact I typed, I felt another invisible chain breaking. I was reclaiming my history, my work, my identity, piece by piece. By evening, it was all ready. The cease and desist letter was printed, sealed, and scheduled for a 9 a.m. courier delivery. The invitations to the data room were queued in Eric's email outbox, scheduled to be sent at precisely 9:05 a.m. The trap was set. Eric looked up from his laptop, his eyes tired but sharp. "You ready for this, man? There's no going back after we hit send." I looked out the window at my own reflection superimposed over the dark lake. The man staring back at me was a stranger, but a stranger I was starting to like. He looked tired, but he also looked determined. "He's going to lose everything?" I said, the words tasting strange in my mouth. A part of me, a small, battered part that still remembered being a little boy who just wanted his dad's approval, felt a final, fleeting pang of something. Pity? Regret? Eric saw it in my face. He leaned forward, his expression softening for a moment. He made his choice, Alex. He made it every single day for 30 years. He didn't just steal your work. He stole your story. He stole your place in your own family. He built his kingdom on your back and your silence. This isn't revenge. This is a reckoning. I nodded, the last flicker of doubt extinguished by the cold, hard truth of his words. He was right. Send it, I said, my voice steady. Eric clicked the button. In the sterile silence of the cheap hotel room, the storm was finally, irrevocably, unleashed. We had done our part. Now we just had to wait for the world to react. The morning of the reckoning began with an almost unbearable silence. It was the most nerve-wracking part of the whole ordeal. We had launched the missiles and now we were just sitting in our makeshift bunker, staring at the radar screen of our phones, waiting for the blips to appear. The courier had confirmed delivery of the cease and desist letter at 9:02 a.m. The invitations to the data room had gone out at 9:05 a.m. The clock ticked. The first blip appeared on the radar at 9:27 a.m. It was a call to Eric's burner phone from an unknown number. He shot me a look, took a deep breath, and answered, putting it on speaker. This is Eric Thorne. Mr. Thorne. This is Robert Manning, General Counsel for H&S Consulting. The man's voice was tight, arrogant, and thick with controlled panic. We have received a highly irregular and frankly baseless cease and desist letter this morning. I am calling to inform you that these accusations are slanderous, and if your client proceeds with this transparent attempt at extortion, we will pursue immediate and aggressive legal action that will see him buried in court for years. Eric leaned back in his chair, a faint, predatory smile playing on his lips. Mr. Manning, thank you for the call. I'd advise you to check your email. I believe a rather important invitation was sent to your entire board of directors at 9:05 a.m. this morning. Contains all the basis you require. I suggest you and your board members review it carefully before you make any more threats. Have a wonderful day. He hung up, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. We could almost hear the frantic phone calls starting on the other end. And so it begins, Eric said, rubbing his hands together with grim satisfaction. The next 2 hours were a cascade of silent activity. The access log for our virtual data room lit up. Robert Manning has logged in. Susan Blackwood has logged in. David Chun has logged in. One by one, the board members were entering the digital room where my father's sins were laid bare. We watched the download counts on the files tick up. Project_Nightingale_Circo.zip downloaded 5 times. Scanned_letters PDF downloaded 5 times. We could feel the shockwaves rippling through the corner offices of downtown. Then, at 11:15 a.m., the call we were truly waiting for came. It was from Mr. Harrison's executive assistant, a woman with a voice so crisp and efficient it could cut glass. Mr. Thorne, Mr. Harrison would like to schedule an emergency video conference for 1 p.m. today. He requests that you and your client, Mr. Alexander Grayson, be present. He will also be extending a mandatory invitation to Henry Grayson and the entire H&S board. This was it. The public square. The court of judgment. This was faster and more decisive than we could have ever hoped for. Harrison wasn't waiting. We will be there, Eric confirmed, his voice calm and steady. I spent the next hour and a half trying to quiet the storm inside me. I took a shower, the hot water washing away some of the tension. I put on a crisp blue button-down shirt and a navy blazer Eric had the foresight to bring for me. I wasn't going into this meeting as a victim or as a hurt son. I was going in as the owner of a valuable asset they had been using illegally. I was a professional and I would act like one. At 12:59 p.m., we logged into the video conference. The screen was a Brady Bunch gallery of grim, pale faces. The 4 board members looked like they had just seen a ghost. They were visibly furious. My father, Henry, was in his opulent office, the skyline of the city behind him, but he looked trapped. His face, usually a mask of confident bonhomie, was a blotchy, sweating mask of blustering rage. He refused to look at my square on the screen. And then there was James Harrison. He sat in a large black leather chair in what looked like a high-rise corner office, a modern painting on the wall behind him. He wasn't angry. He was something far worse. He was cold. He was disappointed. His face looked as if it were carved from granite. "Thank you all for joining on such short notice," Harrison began, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that commanded immediate and absolute respect. "I will be brief. This morning, I and the rest of the board were given access to a data file containing some deeply disturbing information regarding the core intellectual property of this firm. I have reviewed the evidence presented by Mr. Grayson. It is, to my mind, thorough, credible, and conclusive." He turned his piercing gaze, and for the first time, it landed directly on my father. The other board members physically leaned away from Henry's square on the screen, as if his toxicity were contagious. "Henry, I have one question for you. Project Nightingale. The original source code, the developer notes, the academic correspondence, all time-stamped, all created by your son, Alex, between 2011 and 2012. 2 full years before you filed the patent for your Grayson Predictive Index. Explain it." Henry sputtered, his face turning a deeper shade of crimson. "This is a family matter, James. It's a domestic dispute. My son he's disgruntled. He's always been sensitive. He's being manipulated by this ambulance-chasing lawyer. This is a shakedown, a pathetic attempt to extort money from his own family. I am not asking about your family, Henry," Harrison cut in, his voice dangerously soft, yet carrying more menace than a shout ever could. "I am asking about corporate fraud. I am a major investor in your company. My entire multimillion-dollar partnership is built on the efficacy and integrity of that analytical model. A model which, it now appears, you stole from your own son." "I did not steal it," Henry boomed, his voice cracking. "It was a contribution, a family contribution. I nurtured his talent. He was happy to help the family business. It was my turn." Eric gave me a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I unmuted myself. My heart was hammering, but my voice came out clear and strong. I didn't look at my father. I looked directly into the camera, speaking to Harrison and the board. "That isn't true," I said calmly. "I was a college student, passionate about my work. I shared it with my father because I was proud of it, and I was seeking his approval. I was never told it would be patented under his name. I was never compensated. I was never credited. For the past decade, whenever the model needed significant updates or fixes, I was asked to provide my expertise as a family favor, all while H&S Consulting has billed clients millions of dollars based on my intellectual property." I paused, letting the words sink in. This isn't about family drama. This is about professional integrity and intellectual property law. The work is mine. The model is my creation. And its use by H&S Consulting, until now, has been unauthorized. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and damning. The board members were staring at Henry with open hostility. They weren't just looking at a liar. They were looking at a walking, talking liability, a man who had exposed their entire company to a massive lawsuit, public humiliation, and financial ruin. James Harrison delivered the final, fatal blow. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Henry," he said, the name sounding like a verdict, "our partnership and my investment is contingent on 2 things, trust and integrity. You have demonstrated neither. As of this moment, Harrison Industries is freezing all pending investments and terminating all existing contracts with H&S Consulting, effective immediately. Our legal team will be in touch regarding a full forensic audit and the potential dissolution of our partnership." He then swept his gaze over the other horrified board members. "Furthermore, I would strongly advise this board to take immediate and decisive action to mitigate this disaster. Your fiduciary duty to your shareholders demands it." He looked at me one last time, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his stern eyes, respect, maybe even sympathy. Mr. Grayson, thank you for your candor and for bringing this to our attention. My office will be in touch with you directly. And with that, his screen went black. The meeting instantly devolved into chaos. The board members started talking over each other, their voices a cacophony of panic and fury directed squarely at the man in the center square. What have you done, Henry? Our biggest client is gone. You lied to us, to all of us. My father just sat there, the bluster and rage completely gone, replaced by a hollow, gaping emptiness. He looked small, old, defeated. He finally looked up, and his eyes met mine through the screen. There was no anger left in them, just the blank, terrified look of a man who had just fallen from a great height and was watching the ground rush up to meet him. He knew. It was over. Eric and I quietly logged off, leaving them to the ruins of the empire Henry had built on a foundation of my stolen dreams. I leaned back in my chair, the tension of the last few days draining out of me in a rush, leaving me feeling light, empty, and strangely calm. I had won. I hadn't just exposed a secret. I had reclaimed my name, my work, and my worth, not with angry shouts in a living room, a battle I would have lost, but with undeniable, irrefutable truth in a boardroom, a battle they could not win. The reckoning was complete. The aftermath was not a single, dramatic explosion. It was a slow, agonizing collapse, like a building crumbling in on itself in slow motion. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, and thanks to the digital world, we had front-row seats. The day after the disastrous board meeting, H&S Consulting issued a terse, jargon-filled press release announcing that its founder and CEO, Henry Grayson, was taking an indefinite leave of absence for personal reasons, effective immediately. The corporate speak was so transparent it was laughable. He'd been pushed out, fired from the company he had built on my back. The board, in a desperate act of self-preservation, had severed the infected limb to save the body. The financial bleeding started immediately and was catastrophic. With Harrison Industries, their flagship client, pulling out, a wave of panic went through their other major accounts. Contracts were put under review. Projects were put on hold. The company's stock, though privately held, saw its valuation plummet as news of the internal turmoil and leadership crisis leaked to the financial press. But the real aftermath, the one that was both painful and profoundly vindicating to watch, was personal. The carefully constructed, beautifully maintained facade of the perfect Grayson family didn't just crack. It shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. My phone, which had been blissfully silent for 2 days, started lighting up again. This time it wasn't my parents. It was the extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of whom had received a forwarded, carefully redacted summary of the situation from Uncle Thomas, who had decided it was time for the whole family to know the truth. The family WhatsApp group, once a cheerful stream of birthday wishes, vacation photos, and baby announcements, became a digital war zone. Sides were drawn with brutal speed. Some, like my manipulative Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, immediately jumped to my parents' defense. Aunt Carol, I can't believe what Alex is doing to his own parents, after everything they did for him. He was always such a difficult, ungrateful child. Others, who had long suspected the toxic dynamics of my immediate family, sent me private messages of support. Cousin Sarah, Alex, I'm so sorry. We always knew something was off. We're on your side 100%. Don't let them guilt you. The family was fractured, perhaps irreparably. The polite fictions that had held it together for decades had been burned away. The most difficult call came a few days later, from my mother, Janet. She had somehow gotten the number for the resort's front desk and had them put her through. It wasn't a video call, just her voice, stripped of its usual commanding authority, sounding small, reedy, and frail. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She tried a different, more insidious tactic. Manipulation laced with weaponized nostalgia. Alexander? It's Mom. I almost hung up. Eric, who was in the room, saw my hesitation and gave me a slight, reassuring nod. I could do this. I was just sitting here, she began, her voice thick with practiced emotion. And I was thinking about that winter, the one when you were 7 years old, and you got that terrible pneumonia. Do you remember? You were so sick, your fever was so high. Your father and I, we were terrified. I stayed up with you for 3 nights straight, holding a cool cloth to your forehead, coaxing you to take your medicine. I didn't sleep a wink. I just watched you breathe, praying you'd be okay. I did remember. I remembered the burning fever, the terrifying feeling of not being able to catch my breath. And I remembered her there, a shadowy figure in the night. For a flicker of a second, the 7-year-old boy inside me, the boy who had once craved her affection, felt a pang of guilt. She had been there for me. She had taken care of me. But then, the 30-year-old man, the one who had seen the evidence of her cold calculations in her own handwriting, took over. I saw the memory for what it truly was. Not an act of unconditional love, but of duty, of responsibility for an asset that was malfunctioning. It was the one story she could cling to, the one time she had unequivocally acted like a mother, and she was cashing it in now as her last desperate chip. I remember, I said, my voice quiet but firm, devoid of the emotion she was trying to provoke. Thank you for taking care of me when I was sick. But taking care of a sick child doesn't give you the right to erase his identity. It doesn't give you the right to exploit his work for your own gain and build your life on his silence. It doesn't give you a free pass for 30 years of lies. A choked sob caught in her throat. But we gave you everything. A home. A fine education. You gave me a roof over my head. I corrected her gently, but with a steel edge. I earned my education through scholarships you told me I needed because you couldn't afford them. I built my own career. Everything I have, I built myself, often in spite of the obstacles you and Dad put in my way. The one thing I ever truly wanted from you, to be seen, to be valued as your son, was the one thing you never gave. I paused, letting the unvarnished truth of it settle between us. It's over, Mom. There's nothing left to say. Alex, please. I'm your mother. Goodbye, Janet, I said, and for the first time, using her first name felt right, felt honest. It created a distance that was both necessary and liberating. I ended the call. It wasn't a triumphant slam of the phone. It was a quiet, deliberate press of a button. An ending, a boundary drawn in concrete. The final piece of the aftermath arrived 2 days later. An awkward, hesitant knock on my hotel room door. It was Mark. He looked like a ghost. His usually perfect hair was a mess. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive clothes looked rumpled, as if he'd slept in them. His usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a defeated slump. Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I stepped aside, and he shuffled into the room, his eyes darting around at the mess of legal papers and empty coffee cups. "Dad's gone," he said, sinking into the room's only armchair. "He's staying at some hotel downtown. Won't answer my calls. Mom just sits in her room and cries all day. And Olivia left me. She gave me the ring back this morning. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I just listened. She said she couldn't marry into a family whose entire identity was a lie," he continued, staring at his own useless hands. "She said she saw how they treated you, how I treated you, and she didn't want that for our future kids. She called me weak, a coward." He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, pathetic confusion that I'd never seen in him before. "I don't understand. I never did anything to you." "That's the point, Mark," I said, the words coming out without malice, just simple, crushing fact. "You never did anything. You just floated through life on a current of privilege that was paid for by my work, my talent, and my silence. You stood by and watched them treat me like an outsider your entire life because it benefited you. You didn't have to be cruel. You just had to do nothing." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. For the very first time, a flicker of genuine understanding seemed to penetrate his thick skull of entitlement. I'm sorry," he mumbled, the words sounding foreign and clumsy on his tongue. He looked around wildly. The money's gone, isn't it? Dad's company. It's all gone. I need a job. Can you help me? Just for a little while? You're good at this stuff. I looked at my brother, the golden child, now stripped of his shine and begging for scraps. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a handout the only way he knew how to operate. I walked over to the desk, took out my wallet, and placed $500 bills on the table in front of him. Here, I said, my voice flat, this is the last thing you will ever get from me. Your free ride, your 30-year vacation from reality, is over. It's time for you to learn how to build something for yourself. I suggest you start now. He stared at the money, then at me, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish out of water. A deep flush of shame colored his cheeks. He snatched the cash, mumbled something incoherent, and practically fled from the room. As the door clicked shut, I felt no pity. I felt no joy. I just felt quiet. The storm had passed. The wreckage was all around me. And in the middle of it all, I was finally, completely, terrifyingly on my own. And free. The 6 months that followed were not a magical, overnight success story where all my problems vanished. Freedom, I learned, is not a destination you arrive at. It's a road you have to pave yourself, one difficult stone at a time. And it can be messy as hell. The initial adrenaline of the confrontation faded, leaving a quiet, echoing space in my life that I had to learn how to fill. For 30 years, my life had been defined by my relationship with my family, either chasing their approval or simmering in resentment at their lack of it. With them gone from the equation, I had to face the daunting question. Who was Alex on his own terms? My first move was a geographical one. I had to get out of the city. It was haunted by too many ghosts, too many memories of a life that wasn't mine. I had Eric handle subletting my apartment and I rented a small, unassuming house in a quiet town called Silver Creek, a few hours up the coast. It was a place known for its burgeoning tech scene and its proximity to redwood forests and hiking trails. I needed the fresh air. I needed to see things that were old and real and didn't care about my last name. My second move was professional. With Eric's meticulous legal guidance, I formally established my own consulting firm, Grayson Strategic Analytics. It sounded impressive, but for the first month, its headquarters was my garage, and its only employee was me. My sole asset was my intellectual property. The analytical model, now legally and rightfully mine. But an asset is useless without clients, and I was starting from absolute zero with no reputation outside of the scandal I had just created. The call from James Harrison came about a month after I'd relocated. It was unexpected and made my heart jump into my throat. Grayson, he said, his direct, no-nonsense voice coming through the phone. Heard you started your own shop. Smart move. Trying my best, sir, I replied, my voice a little shaky. I've officially and completely severed all ties with H&S, he said. They're a sinking ship, trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon. But my company still has a pressing need for the kind of high-level strategic analysis your model provides. The real model that is not the diluted, poorly managed version Henry and his team were trying to run. He paused, and I held my breath. I want to propose something. I won't be a client. Clients come and go. I want to be your first investor, an angel investor. I'll provide the seed capital to help you scale, build a small team, get proper office space. In return, I get a small, non-controlling stake in the company and exclusive access to your services for the first fiscal year. I was stunned into silence. It was more than a lifeline. It was a resounding vote of confidence from one of the most respected names in the industry. It was validation on a scale I had never dreamed of. I don't know what to say, Mr. Harrison, I stammered, running a hand through my hair. Say you'll think about it, he said, a hint of warmth in his voice. And for God's sake, call me James. I didn't have to think about it for long. That investment was the foundation of my new beginning. I immediately hired a small, brilliant team, 2 young data scientists fresh out of Stanford who were smarter than I was, and a seasoned project manager who could keep us all on track. Our office was, for a few months, the converted garage of my rental house. The hours were insane, the work was demanding, but it was ours. Every success, no matter how small, a bug fixed, a dataset cracked, a positive client email, was a brick that I was laying in the foundation of my own life with my own hands. There were hard days, of course. Days when the silence of the house felt less like peace and more like crushing loneliness. Days when I was hit by a wave of self-doubt, a voice that sounded suspiciously like my father's whispering that I was in over my head. But then I'd get a call from Eric, checking in, his unwavering belief in me a constant anchor. Or Olivia, who had become a surprising and steadfast friend, would text me a funny meme or a picture of a dog she saw on her walk. She had moved on completely, was working for a nonprofit she was passionate about, and seemed lighter, happier, and more herself than I had ever seen her. We never talked about Mark or my family. We talked about books and hikes and the future. My new family was one of choice, not obligation. It was small, but it was real. The final piece of the past was put to rest during a quiet dinner with Uncle Thomas. He'd driven up the coast to see my new, modest house. He looked 10 years younger, more relaxed than I had ever seen him, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders as well. We sat on my small back deck, which overlooked a patch of unruly garden, and we shared a bottle of wine. He told me more about the family trust, the legal and emotional knot my grandfather had tied around the family's legacy. The trust's bylaws were even more specific and cruel than I knew. Upon the grandfather's death, Henry had become the trustee, but the primary assets and control were legally designated to automatically pass to the next direct male heir, upon that heir turning 25. The moment Mark was born, you became a non-entity in your father's long-term financial calculus, Thomas explained, swirling the red wine in his glass. Worse, you were a threat. Your talent, your intelligence, your drive. You outshone Mark in every conceivable way. Every success you had, every award you won, was a terrifying reminder to Henry that he was propping up the wrong son. He had to keep you down, keep you in your place, keep you feeling indebted, to justify the lie he was living. It was never about you, Alex. It was always about his own weakness and his own greed. Hearing it laid out so plainly didn't hurt anymore. It was like a doctor giving a final, definitive diagnosis to a long, mysterious illness. Clarified everything. My entire childhood hadn't just been unfair. It had been a carefully managed illusion designed to protect a fragile man's ego and his inheritance. A few weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. A syrupy, familiar voice cooed into the phone. It was my Aunt Carol. Alexander, darling, she began, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. I was just talking to your mother. Oh, she's not doing well, you know. Not well at all. They've had to sell the big house. Your father, well, he's a broken man. It's just tragic to see. I waited, saying nothing, just listening to the hum of the server fans in my garage office. I know things were difficult, dear, she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But he's still your father. They still raised you. A boy has a duty to his parents, no matter what. I was thinking, maybe you could find it in your heart to help them out? A little something to tide them over? It would be the good, Christian thing to do. I could see her game so clearly. She would be the hero, the peacemaker who brought the wayward son back into the fold, earning my mother's eternal gratitude. Carol, I said, my voice flat and devoid of any emotion. My company, Grayson Strategic Analytics, is hiring. We have an opening for a part-time janitorial position. Pays a fair wage with full benefits. If Henry is interested, he can submit an application online through our careers portal like everyone else. Otherwise, I suggest you lose this number. The sputtering, indignant squawk on the other end of the line was immensely, deeply satisfying. I hung up the phone and blocked her number for good. That evening, I stood in my small office, looking at a whiteboard covered in complex equations and project timelines for a new client. My team had just left after a long, productive day of arguing, laughing, and creating. The air was filled with the lingering smell of coffee and possibility. This was real. This was mine. I hadn't just survived. I was building. It's been a little over a year now since that night at the country club. The night my old life ended and my new one began. My company, Grayson Strategic Analytics, just moved out of my garage and into a real office space downtown with big windows and a ridiculously expensive espresso machine that my team insisted was a business necessity. We have 10 employees now and a growing list of clients who value us for our work, for our results, and for our integrity. James Harrison is more than an investor. He's become a trusted mentor and a friend. Eric is my company's indispensable legal counsel and still my best friend, the one I can call at 2 a.m. for any reason. Olivia and I have a standing coffee date every other Friday. We are, in our own strange, cobbled-together way, a kind of family. I don't think about my old family much anymore. I hear things sometimes, through the inevitable family grapevine via my Uncle Thomas. Henry is working some mid-level management job for a small logistics company, a shadow of the powerful man he once pretended to be. Janet lives in a small, two-bedroom condo, her social circle having evaporated overnight. I heard Mark is working as a bartender and taking community college classes at night, trying to figure out what to do with his life. I hope he finds his way. I truly do. But his path is no longer tied to mine in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes, when I need to clear my head, I drive down to the lake where it all began. I stand on the shore and look out at the wide, open water. The man who arrived at that lake a year ago was a ghost, a hollowed-out shell of a person, a man whose entire identity was defined by the approval he could never win. He was trapped by the weight of a name that wasn't really his, in a family that never really wanted him. That man is gone. He vanished the moment I chose to fight back. I learned that family isn't about blood. It's not about obligation or the accident of birth. It's about choice. It's about the people who see you for who you are, who value you for your character, and who stand by you not because they have to, but because they choose to. It's about the people who help you build your own life, not the ones who use you as a stepping stone for theirs. The truth didn't just set me free. The truth gave me the tools, and the anger gave me the strength to build my own freedom from the ground up. And that's a foundation no one can ever take away from me again. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever had a moment in your life that forced you to completely redefine who you are and what you stand for? Share your story in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more from me, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It really does help, and I appreciate every single one of you.